Welcome to Bay Area Psychology. Tonight, we're going to address the controversial area of false memory syndrome. The majority of us first learned of this phenomenon when Eileen Franklin looked at her 6-year-old daughter and in that moment had a 20-year-old flashback of the murder of her 9-year-old girlfriend, Susan Nader. This murder was perpetrated by Eileen's father, George Franklin. Based on Eileen's recovered memories, her father was sentenced to prison for first-degree murder. The mental health profession is very divided over the phenomena of repressed memories of childhood trauma. On the one hand, clinicians believe that repressed memory is a defense mechanism which protects us from the trauma we are unable to take in at the time it occurs. Remaining unaware allows us to survive terrifying and painful events with our sanity intact. They believe that treatment involves lifting the veil of repressed memories through memory recovery work. And when uncovered, these memories need to be acknowledged as essentially true in order for treatment to succeed. On the other side of this issue are clinicians who are skeptical of anyone's professed ability to diagnose repressed memories of trauma based on the basis of symptoms which might be explained by other means. They are concerned that when therapists form the conclusion that a client has repressed memories, then the therapist may intentionally or inadvertently influence the client to reach these same conclusions due to the high suggestibility of confused and vulnerable clients. In fact, these memories may not be true, and innocent people may be falsely accused of perpetrating horrible crimes. Thus the term false memory syndrome. Tonight, we are fortunate to have two distinguished clinicians with us. I want to welcome Dr. Alfred Ellenberger and Dr. Janet Redman. I want to thank you both for being here with us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, I am aware that this particular topic can get pretty detailed and can get kind of confusing. I know I had to read at least 3 or 4 books myself to prepare. So I thought we'd start out with a little definition. I do have a graphic prepared on the definition of repression, which I'd like to share with you, and then we will talk about that from there. Okay? Now, repression is a natural psychological defense mechanism that serves to keep painful and traumatic material out of our awareness. Despite our lack of awareness, some very severe symptoms can be a direct consequence of repressed trauma. So that brings up 2 issues I'd like to address first of all, which is, how can it be that we can have such a painful and traumatic experience and yet have no recollection? And secondly, what kind of symptoms would we have that might indicate it could be there, even though we don't have direct recall of the memory? So I'm not sure who'd like to field that first, but...
Well, I would maybe start by saying there are people who doubt repression.
Okay.
Repression is not a scientific fact, and in fact there's a fair amount of controversy in the people who study memory about whether repression exists or not.
Okay, that's true.
Turns out repression was one of Freud's earliest ideas, and Freud's kind of a discredited person right now, particularly among some of the community that talks about repressed memory. So repression may or may not exist. It's not a proven fact.
Okay, and I want to point out too that my understanding of repression is not that we just forget, because I know there's a great deal of people who have been through trauma and have chosen not to recall it, not to think about it, versus the way we're using it here, which is I was never aware of it other than the exact moment when it occurred. Is that your understanding of it?
Possibly. I think one of the things that we have to be very careful about right now is that our scientific knowledge is evolving all of the time. We don't have a lot of information that we can say unequivocally, this is the way it is. And one of the things that really causes us problems is when we have people that we need to do research on, we really can't set up a very traumatic kind of situation because it would be very dangerous and would not be ethical. So a lot of the work we're doing is based on laboratory experience, and we can't get it into the actual life circumstance yet.
That reminds me of some work done by Nancy Loftus, as you're talking, where she said that was her dilemma. And I know she's a memory specialist, and I think what she did was decided to have people try to have different students try to implant a memory of being lost in the mall, I think, when they were a child.
Right.
And to see if that was possible for people to be suggestible enough to then have an exact memory with great detail of something that never happened. Are you either one familiar with that
I'm familiar
research?
with that case, yeah.
Okay.
And she was able to establish a memory of an event which had not occurred
Okay.
by suggestion. See, there are really two issues that we're talking about here. One is the existence of repression, which is this kind of pushing memories down to where we're not aware of them. But the other question is, how accurate is memory? And again, particularly the kind of memory that has been suppressed like that for 20 or 25 years. Is that accurate enough to send a man to prison for the rest of his life?
Okay, that's an excellent question.
It's a serious question.
Have you seen in your practice incidents of people recalling?
Yes, I have.
Memories? Okay. How
But-
accurate are they?
I have no idea. For one thing, I don't try to check the veracity of the memories. I'm mainly in the office working with people that are in great deal of pain, and my goal is to see what the reality is for them. Important, though, is that I often talk to people if they bring it up and suggest to them that absolutely this kind of legal confrontation should not be a part of therapy. That's the way I feel.
So you really see it as two different.
I really see
two
it as
different issues.
I don't think therapists should become detectives, police people, this kind of thing. I think they need to work with the reality of the patient in their office. And I think the other thing is we know that memory isn't reproductive. I mean, any of us have had experiences where there's lots of errors.
That's
So-
true. In the reading I did, it's been discredited, this idea of our memory being a computer with
Right.
exact recall. In fact, I have another graphic. I was reading Michael Yapko's book and took a quote from him saying that memory is a process of reconstructing, not simply of remembering. Missing details are slowly filled in with plausible guesses that often aren't even recognized by us as guesses. This is the process of confabulation. And I've seen that word, obviously, clinically I'm familiar with it, but for our viewing audiences, confabulation is not the same thing as lying. It really is that we recall, it seems to me, a sketch of something, and then without even realizing it, we fill in the details that make sense. Is that?
Well, to some extent, though, it's kind of like we're filling in the past to fit the way we think the present is. The Russians, if you fell into disrepute, the Russians would wipe you out they would actually go back and re-edit people out of newspapers and things like that.
Okay.
And in a sense, we're all maybe a little bit like that inside, that as we feel today, we do go back and to a certain extent we rewrite history.
Okay.
I think there's some other things, though, as our knowledge expands and we go forward, we're going to know a lot more. For instance, we are beginning to think that memories are encoded, the traumatic memories are encoded differently than, let's say, you and I in the laboratory doing a memory exercise. And the literature is suggesting, and hear me, I'm not saying that this is written in stone,
Right.
but that the more traumatic it is, the more the person is either threatened with horrendous sexual assault or death, or thinks they are, the more apt are they to move back, dissociate from these kinds of memories.
Okay. In fact, I think I've read some similar testing with post-traumatic stress in general.
That's right.
That there's some sort of chemical change that happens that locks in that memory in place. Okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit the other side. I mean, actually, most people can't forget the bad things that happened to them. I mean, most of us are plagued by the memories of the bad things that happened to us, too much. And a lot of people come to therapy, in a sense, to work those memories, to push those memories out.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny that we're postulating that some memories get too strongly encoded and others are sort of pushed away so that we can't get to them. It's still a vague, the whole area has a lot of material to be learned about still.
Well, and plus, there are similar types of memories. I mean, I've had
Right.
clients who come in and report, horrendous childhood memory that continues to disturb their dreams and their nightmares, and in fact never remembered. And these exact same memories are very, very similar. I've had reported by clients who spontaneously remembered. So it is interesting in that why do some people freeze frame those and other people don't?
One of the things that's kind of interesting is that there is some new research coming out that's suggesting that the more intimately involved you are with what's going on, the more apt you might be to push some of it away and lose the whole peripheral concept of what's going on, and that later on you could have details occur for you. For instance, there was some work done where people stood outside and watched a bank being robbed. And then the people that were actually being made to lay down on the floor and have the gun put to their head, there was a big difference in the kind of details that each group remembered.
That's true. I've heard of similar experiments where teachers will have arrange to have a stranger run into the classroom and either take their purse or do something and then leave, and then interview the different students to find out what kind of details they remember and how they do remember things differently.
The other way this is studied is every so often we have a natural big traumatic event that you can actually study, like when the Challenger blew up.
Right.
And there have been studies looking at people's memory of where were you, for example, when you heard the Challenger had blown up. And that research has told us a lot about the fact that the observer can't tell a real memory from a distorted one by the things that we think you can tell by. I mean, you can't tell by detail or force of conviction or whatever, that these don't tell you whether the memory is right or wrong.
Well, that's true. And before we break, I wanted to mention that the other thing I remember reading was that one of the positions people postulate is the more emotional we feel about something, we have often believed that means it's more real. We've attached larger emotions to things that actually did happen versus not. And then there's been some other studies saying, well, maybe that isn't true. I don't know. What we will do is go ahead and take a quick break. When we return, we will take a look at how recalled memories have been portrayed in the media. Stay with us.
Now may I speak to Jane?
Of course.
Jane?
Right, Doctor.